And so I want to thank you for tuning in to this Facebook Live session where we will talk about the topic of analyzing expenses to manage the spending. Feel free to take notes. Please share any questions you have in the comments below, and I will be sure to answer your questions. I would also like to know how things are going at your church or school, what's happening. Share that in the comments below. I'm very interested in knowing how things are going at your church or school and what's happening. Again, feel free to take notes and share any questions you have in the comments below. Okay. And so I want to know if you are overwhelmed with managing the finances. Do you feel burdened with keeping costs low to operate? Are the expenses being analyzed and tracked? Are you struggling with the expenses? If you have experienced any of these, where you're overwhelmed with managing the finances, burdened with keeping the costs low, or struggling with analyzing and tracking the expenses, put it in the comments below. I would like to hear about it. Well, I want to encourage you that you're not alone, because expenses are burdensome. If expenses exceed revenues, or in the case of if expenses exceed revenues, your church or school will incur a net loss and negative cash flow. And this can possibly cause cash to be tight, or even in a position where you're unable to pay bills. And so I want to know, are you ready to take control of your expenses? And that's what I want to talk about on today. Analyzing the expenses so that you can manage the spending. I am Loie Watkins, and I'm a virtual CFO and accountant. I partner with large churches and independent schools like yours to manage the accounting and financial operations so you can thrive, prosper, and fully carry out your mission. As an accountant for 21 years, I have found that in order to keep the finances on track, you must effectively manage the expenses. And so to share more about expenses, they are the costs to operate and money spent for a service or item within a fiscal year. Expenses are reported on the statement of activity, which is the financial statement. And so analyzing the expenses can help you manage and control spending by keeping costs low, so that your church or school is financially stable. It can also determine how much cash or revenue you will need to operate. And net revenue or net income, or possibly even net gain. But nevertheless, that label does not matter, because we're going to focus just on the expenditures for today. So if you look at your statement of activity for expenditures, you will see categories such as salaries, wages and benefits, rent and mortgage, utilities, supplies, marketing and advertising, repairs and maintenance, insurance, and fees. These are some typical or common expense categories that you will see on your statement of activity. The second thing is identifying your major expenses. What are the major expenses of your church or school? And so you can make a list of the expenses with the largest amount. And this will let you know what your major expenses are for your church or school. Typically, the major expenses for most organizations will be salaries, wages and benefits, rent and mortgage, utilities, marketing, and repairs and maintenance. Those are your typical major expenses. And so, again, you want to first be familiar or become familiar with your expense categories, and then identify your major expenses. And so we'll dive a little further into analyzing the spending so you can understand the activity of the expenses. First, you want to look at the line for total expenditures, which is the total amount. So as we said before, when you look at your statement of activity, you will see expenditures in different categories, and which are subtotal, and then you will have a total expenditure that calculates all of your categories, or adds up all the categories of your expenditure categories. So again, look at the line for total expenditures for each month. You want to look at the report that has it broken out for each month. So you can determine how much are you spending each month. How does the actual expense compare to budget? Is the actual expense higher or lower than budget? You want to analyze what are the causes or reasons for increased spending or overspending. Those are really key information in analyzing your spending. Just becoming familiar with how much are you spending each month, and how does your actual compare to budget, and what are the reasons for that increase in spending. You want to also do the same for year-to-date spending. So you'll do the same process as you did for the monthly. How does year-to-date actual compare to budget? Is year-to-date actual higher or lower than budget? So those are some ways to analyze the spending. And once you have that under your belt, then you can create a forecast of the expenses. So you will have an idea of how the expenses will impact the finances, and you can plan solutions for that. First, you want to calculate the average amount of spending each month. So if you look at your statement of activity and look at the total expenditures by month for each month, calculate what the average is of that. And then you take that average and you're going to add it to your spreadsheet for any remaining months. So if we take this point in time, we're now in the month of September. We would have closed the books for January through August. And so we would have actual expense data for January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and August. And so we want to forecast out our expenses for September, October, November, and December. Forecasting would definitely help us to know how we are projecting our spending to be for the year. Then you want to consider any upcoming major expenses, or you want to take out any major expenses that was a one-time or non-recurring, and adjust that in your numbers. So once you make all of those adjustments, you may, for example, find or discover that your monthly spending is about $100,000. And so for September, October, November, December, you will plug in $100,000. And then you can see what you are projecting for the full year. Once you determine that, are you projecting for expenses to be under or over budget? If it's under budget, that's great. That means you're tracking well with spending. You're managing the spending well. You're making sure that you're taking advantage of any cost savings. However, if you are projecting to go over budget, you definitely want to create strategies to reduce costs. It is so critical that the finances stay on track. One way is by analyzing the expenses so you can control spending and keep costs low while maintaining a stable financial position. And so I will take a look to see if any questions have come in at this time to answer your questions. Again, thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, feel free to share those. Even if you catch the replay, share your questions and I will be sure to respond to them. I hope you have gotten a lot of great notes. And so I would like to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Optimal CFO, where you can hear more great tips. And let's jumpstart your accounting so you can focus on fulfilling your mission